So speaking of which, how do you practice for a live show? And I know, you know, watching you play, it's very clear you beat the daylights out of your hands. I mean, between, the way you play and how aggressive you are, um, obviously drifting and Hunter's Moon, you're beating the guitar. Um, how do you practice for a live show? How do you build up the stamina to do that? And are there any tricks to um that you use to like get better for playing live? I guess is maybe I'm messing this up here, but like, how do you practice for a live show?
Hmm. Well, I guess most of my tunes that I do in a show, I've played them, quite a bit, so I don't necessarily need to rehearse them so much. But like there'll be, at least a handful of tunes that I'll want to put into a show that aren't the hits or whatever. Maybe so I need to kind of brush up on them, and so like or new tunes that I'm playing live for the first time, things like that. So I'll just we're just trying to rehearse it several times and play things at different tempos, slow things down or even speed them up well beyond the tempo that they're played at, just to make sure they're like in my hands. That's kind of the main thing. But, I've been playing solo acoustic guitar since I was about 16, 17, somewhere in there. And that's about 25 years ago or so. And so I used to play at little coffee shops here in Topeka, Kansas, and just have these kind of regular gigs around town. And, it was being out there by myself and trying to entertain, 12 people or whatever. And just, after doing that so many times and getting the feeling of what it's like, this is just like being in my room playing guitar pretty much, but there's people watching. And that was kind of the initial way to get comfortable with it. And then as you progress, you might get in front of more people. And so you try to be a little more entertaining, tell stories about your tunes, how you came up with them. And that's a whole component, as a solo artist, you kind of got to develop that, because if you don't have a band up there, you can't really kind of just go right into the next tune. Or if you're changing tunings, you got to say, oh, there's this one, and I put it in F sharp minor 11th tuning because I like the way it sounded. So, yeah, just developing that banter and things like that. Or, if something happens on the day of a show that might be funny, that's like locally relevant, like you went to some local restaurant or something, or who knows, just trying to think of stuff like that to put into the show. Yeah, I guess those are the things. But most of the time, yeah, I mean, like most of my tunes that I've played several times, I just don't even have to really rehearse them. Just kind of go out there and do it.
Is it just muscle memory? Like you've played drifting a million times, you're good to go. Like,
yeah, except at that one time in Munich.
Yeah. We don't talk about that anymore.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, I guess it's muscle memory. Sometimes I wonder if that term has a negative connotation to it, because I don't want people to think like I just go up there and it's just routine and I'm bored. I'm actually, every time I do, I played that song so many times, but every time I do, I'm trying to still maintain that feeling in there and try to deliver it with, certain dynamics, or, that push and pull on the tempo. And even over time, like I've changed the intro to it, seen with Brian Lynn, I'll do little variations and things to keep it interesting for me. And if people, there's, some people out there have seen like 15 times and they keep coming. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, so I try to think of, maybe some other way I could, change the piece up a little bit and make a new intro or something like that.
So I've been in bands. I've played with big bands. I've played punk bands. But I've always played with a band. I've done a few small solo shows where I've played for maybe 30 minutes. But playing on stage by yourself for a 60-minute or a 90-minute set scares the living daylights out of me. It feels like something akin to like being a comedian and just being on stage by yourself and having to keep a crowd of multiple thousands of people entertained, which is something you do night after night. So obviously you talked about, say it one more time.
I said with varying degrees.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a lot better than I am. Let's put it there. So are there any you obviously talked about keeping the banter in there. But are there any tips or tricks or strategies for keeping the audience engaged? And also, how do you build a set list? How does a set list come? How do you think about the flow of a concert in your mind?
Mm. I'll start with that second part first here. So usually in historically, I've always just kind of arranged the tunes like by tuning, because I love to use altered tunings on the guitar and the way that they kind of open it up and give you some new sounds. So, if you've got a tuning that's say Dadgad in one, and then you could easily go from that to like open D. So you just have to change a half step on one string. Maybe then you'll want to put songs like that are in those together, but if you've got one that's like in CGD, GAD, and then one that's in FAC, GCE or something, you don't want to necessarily put those next to each other unless you want to talk for half an hour. So, because you got to change the strings for so long, but yeah, like it's like that's always kind of been the first thing that came to mind. But I've been thinking about it more lately and really trying to think more about the energy, because if you have too many mellow ones in a row, you might start to see people looking at their watch or something, and you're like, well, maybe I need to play a more upbeat tune next, So, yeah, it's, I like to kind of have something energetic at the start and for a few tunes and bring it down, just kind of that typical kind of ebb and flow, I guess. And I like to actually play a show straight through as much as I can. Sometimes the venues want you to do a break, like an intermission. Yeah, I prefer to just keep going and play for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and try to keep folks entertained. But also, I've got like a baritone acoustic guitar and a harp guitar if I can manage to bring that on the road. Sometimes it's hard to travel with, but having the different instruments helps to keep it interesting too. I still don't sing at all on stage. So, a whole night of acoustic guitar is kind of something new for a lot of people to sit through. It's kind of getting a little more rare out there these days. So, keeping it interesting with different tones with the baritone and the harp guitar definitely helps as well. But and then I forgot the first part of your question now because I've been rambling so long.
No, you're good. Are there any tricks or strategies for keeping the audience engaged through a 60 or 90-minute acoustic guitar set?
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I guess, just those, having different instruments and different timbres and registers and everything helps. But then, just the banter too. If you can think of, how you might introduce your songs, that's always good. And it keeps it interesting. I actually just played a week ago in Colorado, and it was kind of a cool mix of people. There were some real huge fans, and then there was people that had no idea who I was. And so, it was kind of fun to play for people that didn't know who I was at all, and to hear feedback like, oh, it's so interesting to hear what your tunes are about and how you came up with them. So that kind of reminded me of the importance of that. I kind of got a little bit into the mood of just playing a song and then going into the next one and trying to keep the energy flowing like that. But I don't know if it really suits me or not. I think my music's so introspective and people are curious about what I mean with these tunes. They don't have lyrics, so they're just they're interested to hear the stories behind them too.
That totally checks out because, again, like I was talking to my friends, and one of the things they kept bringing back was the feel of your music. And so when you make music that hits people in the feels over and over again, people, especially that doesn't have lyrics, right? Like you're not I don't know, the Beatles. You're not the Beatles, and you can't, what "Can't Buy Me Love" means. You know what "Hey Jude" means. But with instrumental music, you don't have a clear perspective of what it means. You're left to your own interpretation. So everyone's got their own interpretation, and I think because you've affected their feelings so much, they really want to know where you're coming from it with it. Because I think that's where it comes from.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and it's cool. And I mean, it's just it's so cool that you have all this music that just really affects people, and you have this very loyal audience that just loves everything you do. I think it's so cool.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's sometimes I forget. It's like I've been home a bit this year working on new music and things, and yeah, I've got some new stuff that'll be coming out this year as well as the Triplicity record. So it's exciting to get some new stuff for the fans.